What's going on, y'all? Susila Hernandez here with randomBibleProverb.com. Topic today is believers' response to evil. This comes from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 14 through 17. It reads, "Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it, and do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence." The synopsis is: Scripture outlines several ways in which believers should respond to evil. The first point is evil is to be avoided, as seen in Psalm chapter 1 verse 1 says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers." Proverbs chapter 4 verse 14 says, "Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil." 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 22 says, "Abstain from every form of evil." And there's several other scriptures. Check out the blog post. There's a link in the description regarding evil being avoided. So a subtopic under evil being avoided is that evil is likened to yeast. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 6 through 7 says, "Your boasting is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Cleanse out the whole leaven, and you may be a new lump, as you really are unleavened. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed." Galatians chapter 5 verse 9 says, "A little leaven leavens the whole lump." And in Psalms chapter 34 verse 14 says, "Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it." And a second topic regarding a believer's response to evil is that evil is to be hated. Proverbs chapter 8 verse 13 says, "The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate." Psalm chapter 97 verse 10 says, "O you who love the Lord, hate evil. He preserves the lives of his saints. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked." Amos chapter 5 verse 15 says, "Hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. It may be that the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious to the remnant of Joseph." The third thing regarding a believer's response to evil is that evil is to be rebuked. Matthew chapter 16 verse 23 says, "But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man.'" And 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 2 says, "Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season, reprove, rebuke, and exhort with complete patience and teaching." An example of hatred, evil being another example of hatred being rebuked is when Nathan rebukes David. 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 9 says, "Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites." Further, Elijah rebukes Ahab. 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 18, "And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." And John the Baptist rebukes Herod in Matthew chapter 14 verse 4, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And Peter rebukes Ananias in Acts chapter 5 verse 3 through 4. I encourage you to look at the scripture in the blog post that's in the description. Also, Peter rebukes Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. And then there's other examples in 1 Samuel, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Psalms, Daniel, Luke, 1 Timothy, Titus. And all these scriptures are in this blog post that I'm reading from. Okay, so moving on, the fourth thing regarding believers' response to evil is that evil is to be resisted. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 10 says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent." Galatians chapter 2 verse 11 says, "But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face, because he stood condemned." And then Ephesians chapter 6 verse 11 says, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. And further, the scriptures in James chapter 4, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, Ephesians, and Hebrews, 1 Peter. And so the fifth thing and then moving on, the fifth thing regarding the believer's response to evil is that evil is to be repaid with good. Luke chapter 6 verse 35 says, but love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be the sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Second scripture regarding evil being repaid with good is Romans chapter 12 verse 20 through 21. It says, to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And another proverb regarding evil being repaid with good is Proverbs chapter 25 verse 21 through 22 says, if your enemy is hungry, give him a bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink, for you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. And once again, there's several other scriptures. Look at the link in the description to the blog post that has all these scriptures laid out for you. The sixth thing regarding the believer's response to evil is that believers should pray in response to evil. Matthew chapter 6 verse 13 says, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Acts chapter 4 verse 29 says, and now, Lord, look upon their threats and grant to your servants to continue to speak your word with all boldness. In Hebrews chapter 4 verse 16 says, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And there's several other scriptures here. So, and there's one more that I'll mention regarding believers should pray in response to evil. It's Matthew chapter 26 verse 41. It says, watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And the last thing regarding the believer's response to evil is that believers should trust God in the face of evil. Psalms chapter 23 verse 4 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Matthew chapter 26 verse 39 says, and going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And in Psalm chapter 4 verse 8 it says, in peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And there's other beautiful scriptures in Psalms in this blog post that are laid out for you. Also in Isaiah, Daniel, Habakkuk, 2 Timothy, and Hebrews. Alright, so wrapping this up in conclusion, I'm just going to do a brief overview of everything that I went through. So Proverbs chapter 4 verse 14 through 17 says, do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it, and do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. So that was a scripture that this post is based off of. And the synopsis, the theme and topic is the believer's response to evil. And the synopsis is Scripture outlines several ways in which believers should respond to evil. The first thing was that evil should be avoided. Evil is to be avoided, as we saw in Psalm 1:1, Proverbs chapter 4 verse 14, and 1 Thessalonians 5:22. We saw also that evil was likened to yeast in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and Galatians chapter 5. Also, the second thing was that evil is to be hated, as seen in Proverbs chapter 8 verse 13. And the third thing is that evil is to be rebuked, and we saw prominent examples of Nathan rebuking David, Elijah rebuking Ahab, John the Baptist was rebuking Herod, Peter rebukes Ananias, and Peter rebukes Sephora. Zeph. Thank you. Fourth thing was that evil is to be resisted. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 10, Galatians 2 verse 11, Ephesians chapter 6 verse 11. The fifth thing is that evil is to be repaid with good, as seen in Luke chapter 6 verse 35 and Romans chapter 12 verse 20 through 21. The sixth thing is that believers should pray in response to evil, as was seen in Matthew chapter 6 verse 13, Acts 4:29, and Hebrews 4:16. And the last thing regarding believers' response to evil is that believers should trust God in the face of evil, as seen in Psalm 23 verse 4 and Matthew chapter 26 verse 39. Thanks a lot, you guys, for watching. Like, subscribe, and share. All scripture was used from the English Standard Version of the Bible. If you can, leave a like, comment, subscribe, share if you think this was helpful. If you have a chance to donate, if you would like to donate, there's a donate option in the menu in where the blog post is seen. You can donate that way to help us try to avoid additional ads being placed on our website. Thanks a lot, you guys.